A family is in the news for being open and honest in their son's obituary after they lost him to addiction. This got me to thinking, what if we were always honest in obituaries? And how would my obituary have looked if I had passed before I got sober?
I'm JT. I'm in my mid-30s, have a 10-year media career, and nearly a decade of sobriety. So how did another middle-class kid turn into a blackout drunk and a heroin junkie? More importantly, how did it change, and where do we go from here? This is my story.
So, hate to start out on a bummer, but I think it's a really important story. The young man's name was Hunter Lee Clemens, and this is coming to us from ky3.com. This is Lafayette, Louisiana. And as you can see, the headline says, "Family writes candid obituary about 22-year-old's drug addiction." You can see young Hunter, obviously such a shame to see him go. So young, 22 years old. The story reads, "The family of Hunter Lee Clemens is speaking openly about his death, hoping to raise awareness about the epidemic of drug addiction. We've covered all the stats. They're out of control, especially for young people. You can go back a couple videos if you'd like to see the most up-to-date information that I've posted on that." Clemens, 22, died of a drug overdose on February 10th after a long battle with addiction, according to his obituary. Before we go any further, I want to point out, I'm not sure if it details in the tear sheets that I've pulled here, but he died from a heroin overdose, and the heroin was laced with fentanyl. So we'll get back into that, just so you know. Quote, "His family would like to speak the truth about his death," the obituary reads. "Silence would mean Hunter's death was in vain. But if one person's life is saved by his story, we would tell it a million more times." Clemens is described as kind, charismatic, and as someone who would try to find the positive in any situation. Quote, "Speaking the truths, no matter the circumstance, surrounding the epidemic of drug use may be the difference between life and death for someone," the obituary said. "In honor of Hunter's life, we ask that truth be spread in regards to this epidemic and awareness be raised." So I love this story. Obviously don't love that a 22-year-old, another one of way too many, especially over the past couple years, has died of an opiate overdose. But I love that his family is doing this. I think that it is becoming more common. I hope one day that it's not a news story, that families are talking openly about how exactly their young family member, any family member in their life, died of drug addiction, hoping they can be as detailed as possible. The story also went on to read, and I'll post it in the description here, that his battle was really tough. He had gone to treatment and kind of seen the light from treatment, and then, of course, fallen again. And you've heard me talk about, especially with opiates, especially with heroin, and now everything has changed because of fentanyl. When I was doing heroin, there wasn't fentanyl laced in the heroin. There was just, you could get fentanyl. It was a bit harder to get. I didn't really like it that much. But now, I talk about when I was young and when I first knew my parents were full of it, because you come to find out that after just using drugs one time, you're not going to die. Like, nothing crazy like that's going to happen. That was my situation when I was a teenager. Now that can actually happen. So this is a topic for a different conversation, but the whole fentanyl thing, to me, changes the whole game as far as the war on drugs, how we police it, what we're doing at the borders, all that sort of stuff. So unfortunately, I think it's especially sad for Hunter's family, because they can't do anything about the fentanyl being laced in there, and no family can. Anyways, I love that the family has spoken so openly and honestly about this. And again, you can read, there's a lot more details on it. Those were kind of the broad strokes about why they wanted to open up about it. Like I said, I hope one day that we get to a place where this is just so common that everyone wants to tell the story, because we are getting better. We're getting a lot better as a society. And I know we're not anywhere near where we should be, but if I can just tell you, just from my experience in the past 10 years of being sober, how different it is. And I'm a pretty vulnerable person just to start, just naturally. I'm pretty vulnerable. I was raised to be vulnerable. So I don't really have a problem opening up about my deep, dark secrets, or what would be a person's normally deep, dark secrets. I don't have a problem opening up and talking about my flaws. I think it's healthy. Some people are uncomfortable with it, and I totally understand that. We've come as a society from a place where a lot of this stuff was kept down for a really long time. And I think the more and more that families start to speak up about this stuff, channels like this, I do think it will help, because it's going to be really hard for us to curb something like fentanyl and the way that it's been spiked into all these drugs that were before at least semi-recreational drugs. I don't think heroin's ever really a recreational drug, but people do exist who use things like heroin and cocaine recreationally, or use it and then, just leave it behind, stop using it. It's rare, but it happens. So what I wanted to get into about this, though, is I think you see this a lot where, again, really sad. I've had so many friends. My friend Frank, that I've talked about many times on this channel, was like this, where we see it just makes it doubly sad for a young person to go to a drug overdose, because you come to find out, or if you knew them, you already knew, it was incredibly clear how special these people usually are. And I think there's something to that people who are drawn to drugs and alcohol tend to have some kind of a light around them. And it talks in the story about how Hunter was just a really happy guy for the most part, a positive guy. People really liked being around him. And I think you see this all the time. And I believe it in this case. And I believe it in a lot of the stories I read about people who are gone too soon. But that's not always the case. And I think I'm just another bozo on the bus. I was just an average drug addict and alcoholic. I don't think there was anything really special about me. And it got me to thinking, what would my obituary have been like if I had passed away too soon, like I was kind of intending to do at the end of my heroin run? What would that have looked like? Well, I think if my parents were being honest, obviously they'd want to be kind. And I think they would say, he was talented and he was well-spoken. And I think they'd say he loved his friends and he was a good friend and he had so much in front of him. And I think all of those things will be true. But if they were really honest in my theoretical obituary, I think they'd also have to say that he was selfish, that I was self-involved, that I wasn't a good son, that I wasn't a good brother, that I wasn't a good boyfriend. The list really goes on. That I was full of self-seeking behavior, that I was cripplingly insecure to the point of it ruining my life and my relationships, that I was cripplingly fearful of the world around me and how I was going to navigate it. And those things are really hard truths. And I would hope, I don't think it would have happened that way, to be honest with you. My parents probably would have gone with the first stuff and not gone with all the negative stuff I just listed. But if we were really being honest, and maybe the obituary wouldn't be the right place for them to do that, but I would hope that they would be honest at some point about the guy that I was. And keep in mind, these are the people who saw the best in me generally. My dad, certainly. My mom, it's a little more critical. But because I think it's important. I think it's important for me to recognize that I was not a shining light when I was using and I was on death's door. That I was not a guy that I would have died proud to be. And that's really sad, and maybe if you're watching this, it's hard to hear. I know this is kind of a bleak subject, but I think it's important. And the reason I want to say all that stuff, the reason I want to be honest about who JT was back then and what my key characteristics, I'm not just picking out things that I, thought sucked about me. Those were the key things about me. That I was selfish, that I wasn't a good brother or a good son, that I wasn't a good boyfriend. Because I had to get sober to to become the guy that if I pass today, that I will be proud of. I can give myself credit and tell you that those things would not be in my obituary today. If my obituary were done today, I think my family would get to talk about my great story of turning my life around, how hard of a worker I became, how good of a brother and son I became, how I became able through sobriety, and though I struggled, to be present with my mother every minute as she was passing away in those last few days, to be right by her bedside with my sister. I had to get sober to be that guy that I would be proud of a list of characteristics to come out about me today. I couldn't have ever been these things before I got sober. I was not a good guy back then. I'm not proud of the guy I was, and in fact, I've had to work really hard to get past all the regrets I have about the guy I was back then. But the reason I bring this up is that I think if you really got the honest truth from people like me, people who have either died or gotten close to death from drugs and alcohol, they would tell you the same thing. And that's the vicious circle, the vicious cycle that it is that we know, I knew that those things were true about me back then. And that caused me to drink and use more. I always knew that I was capable of more as a person, and that I wasn't living up to the standard of my moral conscience. And I knew that I was really kind of behaving badly for my whole life. But that's why I wanted to have this conversation. Because the good obituary, the good list of characteristics, is there for all of us who are going through this journey. And even if you're watching and you're not an addict or an alcoholic or have any addiction issues or mental health issues, you may be thinking to yourself, man, what would my obituary be like if I went today? Would I be proud of the things? If it was completely honest, if all the truth was out there, would I be okay with what was on that list, with what was in those paragraphs? And that's something you got to ask yourself. But the point of the story is, the flip side is there for all of us. I got to this place from good fortune, from the higher power of my understanding that guided me through it. That's my journey, doesn't have to be yours. And through action. And I am proud of the guy I am today. I'm still getting better. You know, I would probably say one of my biggest flaws still is my selfishness, and I've made a lot of progress. But as much progress as I've made, I am still not anywhere near where I want to be, as evidenced by I've gotten so good at becoming less selfish that I've lived completely alone for the past 2 years. But I'm getting better. I really am. And I think I'm a good brother now. And I think I'm a good son. I was just at my nephew's 4th birthday this weekend. And just the difference between the guy who was there. And I got to tell you, I'm so proud. This is again just a stupid thing to be proud of, but you know what? Everything is on a bell curve, right? I had totally the best gifts for my nephew. All the family, all the friends. My gift was absolutely the best, and I'm really good at giving gifts. And I'm like so proud that I get to be this uncle that totally spoils my nephew. Not just spoils him, but like is thoughtful because I know what he likes and know what he wants. And that makes me really happy. It's kind of a silly thing to make me happy, but I really love it. So I get to be that guy. And I never even thought about, because my sister didn't have kids back before I got sober, about good uncle being on that list. But I know today, like I would be in so much peril if I was still using when my nephew and my niece came around. Because I would be humiliated about the guy that was their uncle. But I know so many people who have come through this, who have been the bad father or the bad mother, but who have come through it. Because it's hard as hell, and it gets harder when you throw in things like kids. But the good characteristics on the obituary, if we're being honest, are out there on the other side for all of us. And I just wanted to reflect on that today. Because if we're being honest, if we were always honest in obituaries, would I be proud about the obituary that went out today? I can say yes today. I would not have been proud 10, 11 years ago. And I hope we can all do some healthy reflection on what that would look like for all of us. Okay, let's get the mail. Mail today is coming from Facebook. This is coming from my girl Devin. And Devin was actually commenting on the video from a couple weeks ago on my experience with sex and love addiction. We had a lot of good comments on that one. Devin says, so inspiring. I long for that peace and keep drowning. In reference to a clip I shared about how much peace I got once I realized that sex could not be an objective for me in life, in relationships. And I picked this comment because more broadly, I've received peace in numerous places that I never thought I would get it before sobriety. And now I've received it in sobriety. And I just, I hurt when I hear from people, which actually happens a lot, that are still struggling in the moment. I'm so thankful for people like Devin who comment and are honest and vulnerable about those things, because I want it. I want that peace for everyone. I thought I was the only one missing out on it for so long. And my biggest takeaway when I hear that people are still struggling for it, I don't know what's going on. I don't know the details of your situation. All I can share is my own experience. And all I can say is that regardless of the addiction, the drugs, the alcoholism, the bad behavior, the single thing, and all these things are wrapped into it for me, but I think you can isolate it as well. The single thing for me that has brought me peace is taking action. That's the best piece of advice I can give to anyone who's struggling with getting that peace. Now, for me, a lot of times it's really dumbed down. It's just like as simple as I keep myself so busy that at the end of the day, when I lay my head down, I have peace because I had such a full day. But in that full day, I'm also doing things that I would not have done before that aren't about me. I'm doing things for others. I'm returning that phone call for the person that I didn't used to have time for. I'm making that extra trip to go see somebody who's in need. I'm doing things this weekend. I had a great opportunity to chair a meeting. That's all the detail I'll give about that, but it was totally impromptu and I hadn't done it in a while. And I just look at those things as a gift from God. If I wasn't in a better place, something as simple as that, even within sobriety, if I wasn't in the right place, I would have just said no thank you. But I've learned that I have to rise to every little occasion. I don't always rise to the big things. Yesterday, this video's coming out a day late. I'm kind of hiding behind the fact that it was a 3-day weekend. But yesterday, I had a total hit a wall again, right back in that spot. Really close on the line of doing the poor me pity party Sunday afternoon. Luckily, I got some things done, but I didn't get my video stuff done yesterday, so I'm a day late on it. But I've gotten pretty good at rising to the little occasions. And that's kind of how I look at it, is all the little occasions add up. And all the little actions for me add up. For me, idle hands is the devil's playground. And I'm sure a lot of you don't have a lot of idle hands because you've got kids, you've got a job. All I really have to worry about day to day is my job, taking care of my house, which is why I have to fill my day even more. And yes, some of that is stuff for me, but it's all stuff, I'll tell you. It is all stuff, including like working out or just doing a good job at my job. It is all stuff that I struggled to do before I got sober. Drugs or no drugs. I struggled to rise to any small occasion before. But now, filling my day with action, creating those goals, figuring out what those things are that are going to fill my day in a positive way, that is what gives me peace as much as anything. Thank you so much, Devin. If you would like to be part of the mail, of course, you can comment on this video or any video in the YouTube comments. I'm still seeing them, all of them right now. I'm getting the alerts. You can, of course, also comment when I post on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. All those handles are right here. If you'd like to have a private conversation, feel free to DM me. I will not share anything from our private conversation, and I rarely do unless it's just incredible, in which case I will ask you first. Anything that's on a public post is fair game. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time. Hey family, if you like what we're doing here and you want to see more, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Share it with someone who you think might benefit from watching this, and feel free to comment below. Love.